Three friends thought a simple sleepover would be safe. They were wrong. Something inside the house had been waiting for them to turn out the lights. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight's tale dives straight into a sleepover that began with jokes and late-night snacks, but ended with fear none of them could explain. They thought they were alone in the house. They weren't. It started on a warm Friday night, the kind that seemed made for junk food, loud laughter, and stories told under blankets. Three friends, Nina, Jessa, and Leah, met at Nina's house while her parents were out of town. The place sat at the end of a long, quiet street, lined with old trees that bent over the road like tired giants. Inside, the air smelled like pizza and buttery popcorn. The house felt safe in that way familiar homes usually did. The girls spread their sleeping bags across the living room floor. The TV flickered with some old late-night movie in the background. The house felt warm, but every so often, a cool draft crawled under the door from the hallway, even though all the windows were shut. They joked it was just the air conditioner acting up again. The first odd thing came from the upstairs hallway. Nina's room was up there, and she remembered closing her door before coming downstairs. But when she went up to grab a charger, the door was wide open. Her room was dark, and the air inside felt cold enough to fog her breath for a second. She brushed it off, thinking maybe she had just forgotten, and headed back down. A little later, the three of them started sharing scary stories. They kept the room dim except for the TV's glow. As they talked, the draft from the hallway grew colder. It slipped around their ankles like something breathing slow and steady right against their skin. They pulled blankets closer and told themselves it was just the thermostat again. Then came the sound. A slow creak from the top of the stairs. It was faint, like someone putting weight on an old wooden step. They froze, staring at the stairway that disappeared into darkness. The house had never felt so open and empty at the same time. Jessa laughed first, trying to shake off the tension. "Probably the house settling," she said. But even she didn't sound convinced. The creak came again, a little louder, then stopped. They turned the TV up and tried to ignore it. But the noise came back. This time it wasn't a creak. It was a soft, steady tapping. Like fingers on wood. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, patient, coming from upstairs. Nina's heart pounded as she forced herself to walk over to the bottom of the stairs. She stared up but saw nothing but darkness. The tapping stopped the moment she moved closer, as if whoever or whatever made it was watching her. Back on the living room floor, they tried to distract themselves with a card game. They kept glancing toward the stairs, even though none of them wanted to. The air felt heavier, like the whole house was waiting to exhale. A sudden bang came from upstairs, sharp, too loud to ignore. Something had fallen or been pushed. Nina jumped, grabbing the railing as if the stairs might come alive. Leah's hands shook so much she dropped her cards. They considered calling one of Nina's neighbors, but none of them wanted to admit they were scared. They tried to laugh it off again, but the house felt different now, like it was listening. The noises stopped for a while, quiet enough that they convinced themselves it might have been a book falling from a shelf or something harmless. They played on, trying to regain some sense of normal. Then, out of nowhere, the living room lights flickered. Once, twice. Then they shut off completely. The TV went dark with them. The house dropped into silence so deep it felt like a vacuum. The only light came from a weak glow spilling from the kitchen nightlight far down the hall. Nina whispered for everyone to stay still. Her voice trembled, and even whispering felt too loud. In the dark, another sound rose. A soft scrape, like nails dragging across fabric. It came from somewhere behind them, slow, pulling, scratching the surface of one of their sleeping bags. Jessa gasped. The sound stopped. They didn't move for a long time. Their breathing sounded too sharp in the stillness. When the lights snapped back on all at once, they blinked hard. Nothing in the room had changed. Nothing seemed out of place. But the feeling of being watched clung to them like cold sweat. Trying to shake off the fear, they all decided to move their things into Nina's room upstairs. Strength in numbers, Leah joked weakly. But none of them really wanted to go up those stairs. The house felt different up there, like the air had thickened. Nina's room was still cold, colder than the rest of the house. They closed the door behind them and locked it. In that locked room, they turned on every lamp and sat close together. For a while, nothing happened. They started to relax. They even joked that the pizza must have been messing with them. But then, without warning, the temperature in the room dropped again. Their breath fogged the air. The lamps dimmed but didn't go out, and out in the hallway, footsteps began to move. Not creaks, not taps, footsteps, slow, heavy, moving from one end of the hall to the other. Then the doorknob turned. It twisted once, then again, harder, as if someone was trying to open the door from the outside. The girls froze. Leah's hands covered her mouth. Jessa clutched her blanket tight. The knob stopped turning. Silence swallowed the hall. Nina stepped forward slowly. She pressed her ear against the door. At first she heard nothing. Then she heard breathing, close, right behind the wood. A long, deep breath like someone standing only inches away. She backed away fast. The footsteps returned, this time heading down the hall toward the stairs. The girls listened as they faded until they could no longer hear them. They waited in silence, but the quiet only made things worse. Every minute felt an hour long. The house didn't feel empty. It felt crowded, filled with invisible eyes. Later in the night, a soft knock tapped against the window beside Nina's bed. 3 taps, slow and even. They turned toward the window, but the blinds were drawn. Nina's room was on the 2nd floor. Nothing should have been able to reach that window. The tapping stopped as quickly as it began. They didn't sleep. They couldn't. Even when they closed their eyes, they felt something watching them. The air grew colder still, like the temperature outside in winter. They huddled together in a single sleeping bag, hoping morning would come soon. Then, around 3 in the morning, Leah noticed something. A shadow on Nina's wall. A faint outline that didn't match any lamp in the room. It had the shape of a person standing in the corner, tall and unmoving. She whispered for the others to look. When they did, the shadow didn't flicker. It didn't shift. It simply stood there. Nina turned her lamp toward the corner. The light reached the wall, but the shadow didn't disappear. It stayed, stronger, darker, like it wasn't coming from the light at all. The room grew silent as stone until the shadow moved. Not fast, not slow. Just a simple shift of its head, turning toward them. The girls screamed and bolted for the door. They didn't stop to look behind them. They flew down the stairs, nearly tripping over each other, and ran out the front door into the cold night air. They sat on the porch steps under the streetlight until dawn. None of them spoke. None of them went back inside until the sun rose completely. And even then, they went in only to grab their things. When Nina's parents returned, they noticed the house felt colder than before. They also asked why every upstairs lamp had been left on. The girls didn't know how to explain. They never had another sleepover at that house. and Nina moved out less than a year later. But every now and then, she still remembers the sound of footsteps in that hallway and the slow turning of the doorknob, as if something inside the house had waited a long time to be noticed. Once in a while, when she's driving past her old street, she sees the lights flicker in the upstairs window, even though the new owners swear no one uses that room anymore. Some places don't like being forgotten, and some things inside them wait for the next quiet night. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Welcome back to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight we return to sleepovers that should have been harmless, but turned into something no one could explain. Here are two more tales of nights ruined by things that slipped into the quiet when the lights went out. It happened at Maya's cousin's house, out in a quiet suburb where every driveway looked the same. Maya hated sleeping anywhere unfamiliar, but her cousin Tori begged her to stay for the weekend. The house smelled like vanilla and dust, and the AC rattled as if it was always about to give out. Tori's room was small but warm, filled with posters and soft lights. At first, it felt safe. They spent the night making bracelets and whispering about school. The room felt cozy with the little lamp glowing amber. But around midnight, the AC clicked off. The air went dead still. The room seemed to tighten, like everything was waiting for something to move. Maya heard it first. A soft, thin whisper coming from the floor. It sounded like someone breathing words through a crack. She froze and grabbed Tori's arm. They listened. At first, nothing came. Then the whisper slid out again, faint but clear. "Is someone awake?" The voice wasn't a child's voice or an adult's. It felt like a voice that didn't belong anywhere. It came from under the bed. Tori whispered that it was probably something outside, maybe the water heater or pipes. But there was no water heater under the floor, and no pipe whispered someone's name. The whisper came again. Longer this time. Slow, like someone trying to remember how to speak. "Maya, I know you hear me." Every hair on her arms rose. She clutched her blanket and stared at the bed frame. Tori told her to stop listening, stop imagining things, but even her voice trembled. They stayed frozen in the glow of the lamp. Then the whisper changed. It wasn't asking anymore, it was begging. "Let me out." Maya backed up so fast she knocked over a cup of beads. They scattered across the floor in every direction. The whisper rose again, this time angry, like whoever was beneath the bed had grown tired of waiting. "Let me out." The floorboards under the bed thumped. Once, twice. Something hit the underside hard enough to shake the mattress. Tori screamed. She grabbed Maya and reached for the doorknob. But the knob was ice cold. Too cold for a room with no AC running. Their breath fogged the air. The thumping grew faster, harder. Whatever was under that bed was pushing up like it wanted to break through the mattress. When they finally yanked the door open, a cold gust pushed past them, as if the room had been holding its breath and finally let go. They raced to the living room, where the lights felt too bright and too warm. Tori's mother found them trembling and demanded to know what was wrong. They couldn't explain it. They couldn't even go back into the room to grab their pillows. Later, when Tori's parents checked the room, nothing was under the bed. No animals. No loose floorboards. No drafts. But all the beads Maya dropped were gone. Every last one. They never found a single one under the bed or anywhere else. That night, Maya slept on the couch. Tori slept beside her. Neither of them dared to enter that room again. The next morning, Tori's mother said the A-key must have made strange noises, but the girls never believed that. On the ride home, Maya kept thinking about the whisper knowing her name. Soft, hungry, patient. It felt like whatever was under that bed wasn't trying to scare her. It was trying to reach her. And now it knew exactly who she was. Let's start story 3. The girl in the mirror. Gabby loved sleepovers at her friend Hannah's house because Hannah's room had a huge old mirror leaning against the wall. It looked like something pulled from an attic, tall, heavy, and framed with dark wood, carved with strange patterns. Hannah always said it belonged to her great-grandmother. No one knew where it came from before that. That night they stayed up eating chips and watching videos until the house got quiet. The mirror stood across from them, catching bits of moonlight through the window. It felt like a doorway more than a piece of glass. Around 1 in the morning, Hannah fell asleep first. Gabby stayed up scrolling on her phone. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the fridge downstairs. She looked at the mirror without really meaning to, and that's when she noticed something strange. Her reflection wasn't moving right. She lifted her hand to wipe her face. Her reflection lifted its hand, but not at the same time, just a little late, like it needed a moment to understand what to do. Gabby froze. She waved slowly. The reflection waved back, but with a strange stiffness in its wrist, as if copying her took effort. She looked over at Hannah to see if she was awake. When she glanced back at the mirror, her reflection was standing. Gabby wasn't. She lay in her sleeping bag on the floor. But the girl in the mirror stood tall, staring at her with a flat, empty expression. Then the reflection leaned forward, pressing both hands to the inside of the glass. Gabby scrambled backward, knocking into Hannah. Hannah woke up groggy, asking what was happening, but Gabby could barely speak. She pointed to the mirror. The reflection wasn't there anymore. Hannah told her she must have been dreaming while half awake, but Gabby refused to look at the mirror again. They tried to settle down and go back to sleep. For a few minutes, the room felt normal again. Then Gabby heard a soft tapping. Knuckles against glass. Tap, tap. She could see the mirror from the corner of her eye. She didn't want to look directly at it. But the tapping grew louder, faster, urgent. Hannah finally turned on the lamp. The mirror was fogged over from the inside. A handprint appeared on the glass, then another, then a third. More and more pressed against the inside surface, as if many hands were trapped in there, pushing hard to get out. The fog swirled like breath, thick and fast. Gabby screamed. Hannah pulled her toward the door, but the room grew colder as they moved. The mirror rattled against the wall like something was slamming into it from behind. Just as they reached the hallway, the rattling stopped. They glanced back. A new reflection stood in the mirror. Not Gabby, not Hannah, a girl neither of them had ever seen. Her hair hung damp around her face, her eyes dark and hollow. She pressed her forehead to the glass as if watching them leave. They ran downstairs and spent the rest of the night on the couch with every light on. When Hannah's mom checked the mirror the next day, it stood still and clean, showing nothing strange. But Hannah later told Gabby something she hadn't wanted to say that night. Her great-grandmother didn't buy that mirror. She found it locked in a room of an abandoned house she used to clean. A room whose windows were sealed and whose door had been nailed shut from the outside. That mirror was the only thing inside. Gabby never spent the night there again. And Hannah told her that sometimes, when she's alone in her room, the mirror fogs up by itself, even when the air is warm. Some things come alive only when the house goes quiet, and some stay close long after the night ends. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Here's a brand new tale added under the same title. Another sleepover that went wrong the moment the lights went out. What followed left everyone afraid of the dark for good. Welcome to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight we add another tale to our growing list of sleepovers that should have been safe, but turned into something none of the kids could explain. This one starts with a simple backyard tent, a quiet night, and a presence that didn't belong on the other side of the canvas. Alex always loved camping, but this was the first time he ever tried it in someone's backyard. His friend Carson had a big fenced yard with tall trees that blocked the neighbors on every side. Carson's parents set up a large canvas tent for the boys to spend the night. It was one of those thick, old camping tents with metal poles and a heavy zipper door, the kind you could hear every sound through. It was a warm night, the grass still holding the heat from the day. Crickets chirped from the bushes. The air smelled like charcoal from the grill and the faint sweetness of the trees. The boys filled the tent with flashlights, sleeping bags, and enough snacks to last all weekend. At first, the night was nothing but jokes and whispered stories. They built a little lantern glow inside the tent that made everything yellow and cozy. The fence creaked now and then in the breeze, but that was normal for Carson's yard. Everything felt harmless in that easy, suburban way. Around midnight, the house lights went off in the windows behind them. Carson's parents had turned in. The yard fell into a softer darkness. The boys settled into their sleeping bags, talking about school, games, and who could sleep the longest without waking up. Then the first sound came. A soft drag across the tent wall. Something brushing the canvas low to the ground. It wasn't wind. It wasn't branches. It was too slow, too steady, as if fingers were sliding across the fabric. Alex sat up right away. Carson did too. The tent wall pressed inward slightly, like something was leaning on it from the outside. The fabric dented inward right next to their heads, then slid along the side with a faint scrape. They froze. Neither of them said a word. The dragging sound moved toward the back of the tent. The grass outside rustled softly. Something was circling them. Carson whispered that it was probably one of the neighbor's dogs. Alex wanted to believe that, but the fence was too high, and the gate had been locked. No dog could slip inside without making noise. The scraping returned this time right at the foot of the tent. Slow, curious, like something feeling the shape of the tent with its hands. Alex clicked on his flashlight and shined it at the canvas. The light pushed through the fabric, brightening the shape of the wall. For a moment, they saw nothing. Then a shadow rolled across it. Low, wrong-shaped, too long in the arms, too smooth in the way it moved. It passed by in one silent glide, like it didn't quite touch the ground. The boys whispered to each other, trying to come up with some excuse, some explanation that would make sense. But the shadow didn't match anything they knew. The scraping stopped for a long minute. The yard grew still. Even the crickets went silent. Silence so complete, it felt like something had stepped into the space between all sound. Then the breathing started. Right outside the tent wall, slow, steady breaths. Each exhale made the fabric tremble. The breathing was too close, as if the mouth was only inches from the canvas. Alex held the flashlight tight. Carson grabbed the zipper on the tent door, but didn't open it. Neither of them wanted to see what waited outside. The breathing got louder, wet, thick, like someone inhaling with effort. Something pressed a single point into the tent wall like a finger. It dragged downward, slow and straight, leaving a long dent in the fabric. At the bottom, it stopped. Then another finger joined it, and another. A whole hand pressed into the canvas, then another hand beside it. Both pushed inward as if something was preparing to crawl inside through the wall itself. Alex dropped the flashlight. The boys scrambled to the far side of the tent, hearts pounding, breath sharp as glass. The hands dragged their way upward, stretching the fabric like it was about to tear. Carson whispered for Alex to run. But there was nowhere to run without stepping outside. Then came the worst sound of the night. A tap on the metal tent pole, a light, curious tap. Then another, and another, like someone testing the strength of the frame. The tapping climbed up the pole, slow, rhythmic, almost thoughtful. The boys held their breath. Neither dared move. Suddenly the tapping stopped. A new sound replaced it, something small dropping into the grass outside, like pebbles falling. But the sound was too soft, too sticky. Whatever it was, it landed close to the tent door. Alex whispered that they had to make a run for the house. Carson shook his head at first, scared to even stand. But the silence outside grew heavier, like the thing had paused right at the door. Finally, they counted to 3 under their breath. Carson ripped down the zipper. Cold night air rushed in. The yard was pitch dark, except for the house light far across the lawn. The boys bolted across the grass barefoot, stumbling, pushing each other forward. Behind them, something moved fast across the yard, too fast, too light, like it didn't step but skimmed. Alex didn't dare look back, but he heard it, a faint rasp, like nails skimming the grass as it crawled. When they reached the porch, the motion light snapped on. The yard lit up in a wide, bright glow. Nothing moved. The tent stood still. The fence swayed, but nothing crawled. Nothing watched them. Nothing breathed against the canvas. Carson's dad opened the door, half asleep and angry, asking what they were doing. The boys tried to explain, but the words came out tangled. He walked them back to the yard with a flashlight, annoyed but curious. The tent was empty. Everything looked normal except for one thing. On the side of the tent where the hands had pressed, long streaks ran down the fabric. Not tears, not dirt. Something dark, almost shiny, like the residue left by wet fingertips. No footprints. No tracks, no broken fence boards, no sign of anything living. Carson's dad swore it was sap from the trees. But the streaks didn't smell like sap. They smelled like metal. Cold and sharp. The boys slept inside the house for the rest of the night. Carson took the tent down the next morning and stuffed it into the trash bin. But Alex swears he heard something moving in the bushes before they went back inside. Something low. Something patient. Something that knew they were watching for it now. Some things wander places they don't belong, and some wait for the night when a quiet tent is the only thing between them and the living. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories. Let's move to our next one. This sleepover looked ordinary until something in the house started calling from a place no one should ever answer. Welcome back to the Black Hour Stories. Tonight we add another full tale to this collection of sleepovers that turned into encounters with the impossible. This one follows a group of friends who thought the scariest part of the night would be their own jokes, until the house itself began whispering their names. Our first story is The Phone That Called from the Attic. Most of the time, Emma's house felt cheerful. It was old, but it carried the warm smell of coffee, laundry soap, and the lemon cleaner her mom used every Sunday. Her friends loved staying over because the place always felt lived in, never too quiet, never too empty. But there was one place none of them liked. The attic. The door to it sat at the end of the upstairs hall. A square panel with a pull string that hung just low enough to brush the top of Emma's head if she got too close. The wood around it was darker than the ceiling, as if someone had scrubbed at it for years and never got it clean. Nothing strange ever happened with it, at least not when adults were around, but every kid who visited said the same thing about the attic. It felt like someone was standing on the other side of the door, waiting. That night Emma had two friends sleeping over, Brianna and Kayla. Her parents were gone for the evening and wouldn't be back till late. The girls filled the house with loud, goofy chatter, the kind meant to drown out the quiet. They made microwave popcorn, spilled half of it, and left a trail up the stairs as they ran to Emma's room. The night started soft and easy. A movie on Emma's laptop. A pile of blankets. The faint hum of the fridge downstairs. Everything felt safe until the first sound came. A phone ringing. Not Emma's phone. Not the house phone either. Her parents had switched to cell only years ago. This ring was different. Old. Metallic. The kind of ring you only heard on phones with actual bells inside them. Brianna asked where it was coming from. Emma listened, and her stomach tightened. The ringing came from the attic door. The phone rang once, then again, echoing softly under the ceiling panel, like someone had tucked a rotary phone among the boxes and dusty furniture upstairs. The three girls stared at the attic door from down the hall. None of them moved. Kayla said it was impossible. Emma agreed. But the phone kept ringing, steady as a heartbeat. It didn't stop until Emma's laptop glitched and paused the movie, the sound crackling like static. When the ringing stopped, the attic went back to its heavy silence. The girls sat together, waiting for something else to happen, but nothing did. Eventually, they convinced themselves it was a noise from outside, maybe a neighbor working late or a ringtone coming from the street. They settled back into the movie and tried to forget it. Half an hour later, the phone rang again. This time it was louder, sharper. Each ring felt like it cut straight through the ceiling and into their ears. The girls didn't even want to walk past the attic door, but the sound kept going, relentless and steady. Emma finally stepped into the hall with her flashlight. The air was cold near the attic door, colder than the rest of the house. She could see her breath faintly in the beam of the light. Kayla and Brianna stayed behind her, gripping each other's arms, whispering for her not to touch anything. The phone rang again. Emma put her hand on the pull string. Just touching it felt wrong, like the cord hadn't been used in decades, yet somehow held warmth, as if someone had just handled it from the other side. Before she could pull it, the phone stopped ringing. The girls backed away fast and ran into Emma's room. They shut the door, turned on every lamp and tried to calm down. None of them wanted to admit they were scared, but the way their voices shook made it obvious. Around midnight, Emma's mom texted to say she'd be home later than planned. The girls didn't respond right away. They just sat on the floor, blankets wrapped around their shoulders, listening. For a while, the house stayed quiet, too quiet. Even the fridge downstairs stopped humming. The whole place felt paused, as if holding its breath. Then the attic phone rang again. Only this time, it wasn't just a ringing. A voice spoke between each ring. Not words, not anything human. A long, distorted breath that pushed through the bell sound, like someone exhaling inside the metal of the phone itself. The noise slid down the hallway like cold air. It echoed under the bedroom door, through the cracks, into the room. The girls covered their ears, but they could still hear it. The voice was faint, but it was there. Something calling from the attic. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Brianna whispered that they needed to get downstairs where it felt safer. Kayla tried the door. It opened easily, but the hallway outside was darker than before, as if all the upstairs lights had dimmed at once. The attic phone kept ringing. Slower now, methodical, as if waiting for someone to answer. They hurried down the stairs, trying not to look back. Halfway down, a sharp click echoed above them, the attic door swinging open by itself. They didn't see it. They didn't have to. The heavy wooden thud traveled through the house like a shock. At the bottom of the stairs, the air grew warmer again. The lights returned to normal. The house hum picked up where it left off, like someone flipped a switch. The ringing stopped. They waited in the living room with every light on. They turned on the TV, not watching anything, simply letting the noise fill the space. They sat close, thinking about the attic door, wondering what might have been waiting on the other side. Just after 1 in the morning, Emma's mom came home. She found the 3 girls curled up together on the couch, wide-eyed and silent. When Emma tried explaining the ringing, her mom said something that made the girls fall quiet. The attic doesn't have a phone. It's never had power up there. That space hasn't been used since before we moved in. Emma asked if anything had been left behind in the attic by the old owners. Her mom hesitated. She said the previous family warned them not to store anything up there because of a strange noise problem, but they never described what kind of noise. The next morning, Emma's mom opened the attic to prove everything was fine. The space was empty, all except for one thing. A single rotary phone sitting on the floor, unplugged, its cord frayed and cut. Dust covered everything except the phone's receiver, as if someone had been holding it recently. Emma's mom threw the phone out immediately. But that night, after the sleepover ended and her friends went home, Emma heard a faint metallic ringing from the trash bin outside. She didn't check it. She didn't go near the attic again either. And sometimes, when the house gets quiet, she swears she can still hear it, one soft ring coming from somewhere above her head. Some calls never come from the living, and some doors stay closed for a reason. Tell us where you're listening from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from the Black Hour Stories.